Okay, today is March 31st, 2022, from the Sisters History Museum.
Good morning. My name is Joel Aylor, and I have been around Sisters for some time. I actually came here that I can remember in '53. My folks said I was here a little earlier than that, but '53 was when I remember arriving here in Sisters, and we came here because my dad was pursuing a falling job for Barclay. He'd been falling for Warm Springs Lumber Company prior to that, and we lived in Warm Springs. I was actually born in Warm Springs at the hospital there in '47. But my dad was in the war. He was in the Navy, and he met my mom. She was a full-blooded Nez Perce from Lapwai, Idaho, but she was a riveting Annie at the time. And so they got together, and they gravitated to Oregon because her family was in an experiment at the time at Warm Springs. Warm Springs was a model at the time for complete development for a tribe, having human resources, hospital, police service, dairy, everything. So they were completely self-sufficient down there on the reservation. And Dad logged for Warm Springs Lumber Company, and he heard that there was what he thought was a better job up here for Barclay logging. They needed fallers. And so he came up here, and we moved here to Sisters. Sisters was quite a different place at '53. It was all gravel streets, and if you needed something other than gas, you had to pretty much go to Bend or Redmond. It wasn't a lot here, except people, a lot of great people. I was fortunate enough to, as I got into school and became interested in Sisters and the history, I had a project where I interviewed a lot of the old timers that were still alive here then. A couple of guys that came in here horseback in the early 1900s and camped on the ditch up here by the Gallery Restaurant. That ditch served water for the mill, and apparently in those early 1900s there was 5-6 sawmills around here. But anyway, and when I first arrived, it was a much different place. But the people, everybody knew everyone else here. I mean, you never went anywhere. As a kid, you knew there was a limits as to what you could do, because it was pretty quickly whatever you did that was wrong got back to your folks. And if there was one thing you didn't want, and that was to have something to get through to your mom, and then it went to Dad, and it was tough times for you then. So you had to really walk the straight and narrow. But there was a lot of people here that were working for Barclay logging. There was a little bit of farming still then. There was quite a bit of things that were associated with Cloverdale and the State Highway Department people. So we had quite a community of folks here. And of course, I was a baby boomer, so there was, the class I was in, there was a lot of kids, more than previous. So I had a large class. We grew up down on the south end of town, right next to Fred Painter, the policeman. So it was really tough for me to get away with much of anything. Later on, I think well, I want to back up for a second. One of my fond memories is, as a youngster, my folks would let me go, and I would walk down, and this was about 55, 56, and I could walk down there when they start bringing the stock for the rodeo, and because a lot of things centered around the rodeo in those days, and so that was a big deal. I believe in about '58, my dad decided to quit logging, and he bought the Chevron station. And Chevron was a private edge of Standard Oil Company. Everything else, Standard Oil was company owned, Chevron was privately owned. And so the Chevron station here in town, and I went to work in the station there, and one of the advantages there for me, and the learning that the customer was always right, is Dad took on a partner, and it was Frank Lighthouser. Frank, older than I was, of course, but he had spent his younger years working in the grocery store for his dad, and so Frank understood that customer service and really helped me a lot in learning how to say and do all the right things working there at the service station. I had a great memories of Frank and the time I spent with him. My mom and dad, my brother worked there at the station. In those days, there were so many different times when, like fishing season for instance, when this town would come alive, the people that would pour in here, hunting season, fishing season, the people were traveling, they had to buy ice because they had no refrigeration. So we had an ice house there. My dad would bring 300-pound blocks of ice on a trailer from Bend, and then we'd cut them with a electric saw, score them, and then break them into 25-pound blocks and store them. Had propane. We'd take shifts. I usually worked with my mom, and then my brother would work with my dad. Probably in the 60s, 61, Louis Johnson across the street died in a fire there. He had an apartment above the sporting goods store there, and he passed away. And my dad bought that store, and now he had a sporting goods store and a service station. So kids would be driving up and down Main Street, and I can remember either being in the store or in the service station looking out, watching them driving up and down the street. It didn't seem right to me at all, but there wasn't much I could do. But they were fun times. Living here, I can't remember the exact date, but it must have been around 64. I went to work in the sawmill. It was a Lundgren's mill down north of town here. It was I think it was the last completely steam-driven mill in the state of Oregon, and it existed down there. And Keith Cutsforth was hauling logs. One of the Chippewas that was hauling logs into that mill, and it once in a while I was working there with Mike Smith, and his dad was a sawyer in the mill, and it was controlled by this steam, and it had a governor on it and a belt that controlled that governor that spun down there off that boiler room. And every once in a while they had this fireman, and he was what I thought pretty old. Well, that belt once in a while would come off of that wheel, and the engine would start building because it was now unchecked, and the trim saws would start screaming like sirens. Things were going so fast, and we would run up there to see what was going on, and he was there by hand trying to get that belt back on that thing spinning. There was a small wheel on that governor, and finally he'd get it on there, and that governor would take control, and it'd start slowing it down. We were just about ready to run for the pond because we knew any second. I mean, that thing could run away, and pretty soon it'll blow up. But yeah, that mill was fun to see. There was a pond monkey there. I've got to tell this part. This pond monkey, his name was Edis Brockett. Brockett family, the boys went to school. They were all older than I was. But he would, to make his job a little bit easier on the night shift, he would pull those giant pine logs back and save them. So the first half of the shift, he'd push those little ones up while he was fresh. It took a lot of work to keep feeding them up the walkway to the mill. And then when evening come, the last half shift, he'd ever just once swallowed that pike pole, he'd push one of those big ones up. Well, now that 5/4, because those pine logs were like that tree there, they were gigantic, and that 5/4 would be 36 inches wide and weigh a ton, and it'd come off that chain, and you'd try to pull that, and we'd holler out at him, and he'd just look over and smile at us. So Leonard Lundgren owned that mill, and Leonard had the place down the river there, and then he also had a big setup in Bend. But those were some fun times as I was a youngster, and in those 60s I moved away for a while and went into line work, but I always stayed based here in Sisters, and I had actually the place I owned is the last house, I believe, on Main Street, or I call Main Street, on the main thoroughfare here. There's it's right up there by the sporting goods store, that little house there on the left there, just past the stitching post. That house, there's the last house left on there. But anyway, I bought that from Don Baker, and about in the early or mid 60s, I bought that from Don Baker. And
what is it now? Is it still a house, or?
it's a business. I think it's a winery.
Oh, that one, yeah.
If I'm not mistaken.
Yeah.
But
You still own it?
no, I sold it to Harold at the time. Barkley. He asked me to give him a chance to buy it because he owned so much property right in there, but he didn't end up buying, so other folks did. But then I moved out on I'll still refer to it Squaw Creek, because that's for us. We grew up here, and the creek was a big thing for us. There was 3 dams here close to town, and it provided swimming and irrigation, fishing, a lot of things for us. But I moved out to a place just out on the Redmond Road and lived there for years, from I think 72 till about 5 years ago. I owned that place there. I bought that place from a fellow that had the gallery restaurant.
Oh.
But going back in time a little bit, the restaurants there, when I first started work at the mill, I'd work at the mill in the night shift, and then I'd help my dad farm on the Barkley place a little bit. He farmed the Barkley place for Harold there. And then I'd also clean up down here for Cliff Allman, who had the restaurant. I would help clean that up, and then he sold that place, and the woman that bought it, I stayed on with her for a while. I'd fill in there wherever I could, helping her straighten it up and get it ready for the next shifts.
Huh.
Those are the times. I think about was traveling in Alaska working line work, and I came back home for kind of the last time, I guess, in 72, and went to work for Central Electric. And I went to work for them as a lineman. And in 1972, Central Electric had somewhere around 38 to 4,100 customers. And I'm not sure, but they probably got 25,000 customers now. Central Electric was a rural, it stretches from Camp Sherman, actually it stretches from the top of the mountains to the South Fork of the John Day River. It covers 5,400 square miles, and it's a really large REA. And it was one of the early ones. I mean, when they came up with, the federal government come up with the Rural Electrification of America, that's what it stood for. I mean, Central came online and provided really needed commodity for rural people. And Sisters was a benefit of that, of course, and as well as Cloverdale and so forth, because some of the first areas that received power from Central Electric. So I spent spent a number of years there and working for them as a lineman. I worked my web superintendent and operations coordinator, and I finally retired from there and went into development and land development and speculation in Bend, but I've always been based here in Sisters, and you know, it's just like I said in an interview a number of years ago when we were talking with the Historical Society, it's a people. You know, you go back and look at people like the Lighthousers, and you know, I was always close to Frank and his brother Floyd, and you know, they just were really fine people that were so instrumental in the community and with the store that they had, and how they were always reaching out to help people, whatever way. His dad, you know, was one of the original founders of the Rodeo Association, so he was always there to help wherever they could. But so many great people that around this community, and I miss the fact that there wasn't many I didn't know around here, where now I can come into town and go down to a restaurant or so forth and really not know anybody. And that's kind of sad, but that's what happens. It's grown, and the thing about Sisters is that in terms of size, here in the community, you know, that people think of Sisters as when it was 610 people. And outside the area, there was a couple people down on Camp Polk, the Lundys and the Cutsforths, but there wasn't much else outside other than Camp Sherman. And what they don't realize is how many people are in the subdivisions around here: Crossroads, Tollgate, Black Butte, Panoramic. There's a lot of people outside the area here that make up now this community, and they associate with Sisters. Anybody asks for, they don't say they're from Tollgate, they say they're from Sisters. So, so anyway, it's still a great place. People want to come here. I can remember at the co-op, you'd put out a advertisement for a electrical engineer, and you'd get 450 applicants, and every one of them was overqualified. And I would ask them, when you narrow it down to 10 people, I'd say, well, what's your desire, or why are you willing to leave where you're at with, you're making $20,000 a year more and come here and go to work? He said, it's for the schools, safety of my children, and what's to offer here. The hunting, the fishing, the skiing, it's just everything that's offered here. And then, so it was easy to pick up some great people and a number of businesses, because everybody wanted to come here. Everybody wanted to come to Sisters. Everybody hoped they could afford to get a place at the ranch, Black Butte, or at Camp Sherman. And of course, Camp Sherman was famous then, it still is today. I mean, those people that settled there came from the wheat country, and I got to know a lot of them over the years, and I spent a lot of time working on Camp Sherman, and it just, I have a lot of great memories here, and I appreciate this chance to sit down and tell a little bit about my past and what it meant for me here.
What year did you graduate from high school?
64.
And was that the building, the brick building, or where was the high school then?
Yes, that's correct. We went to school there, and the only one that's left standing up there now.
I see.
And I was tried for years to get this high school back. I got on the school board here, spent a lot of time working, trying to bring the high school back here. There was a lot of unfortunate things that happened for our kids leaving here and going to Redmond. Accidents for them. It was unsafe. It was hard for them to make that adjustment to go to Redmond. It was a completely different atmosphere there for the kids, and so I spent a lot of time on the school board, as chairman of the school board, stuff, trying to get the school back here. And it was after I left the board that they finally brought the school back here, but the high school kids back home here, and that was a great day, because when I was a youngster, I can remember or the Oregon State Championship, and some of those games that I remember one year we were snowed in down there and we couldn't even. There was 18 inches of snow on the field, and we was getting ready to play the state championship game. And Barkley donated a grader, and the whole town turned out. And they were down there grading and shoveling out the stands and to get ready to play the championship game, which, by the way, we won. But that was a real community spirit there, and it was sad to see our kids leave and go away for that period of time. And but it was a great day when we were able to bring them back home.